thumbs facing forward. She reaches behind his forearm, wraps around and grabs his biceps. She looks down at the ground. Her feet kind of step out a little bit from behind his shoulders, both her feet. And he does a down up, and she presses up. It's really important when he goes down that she not go down. She should already be in the position she's going to jump from. If she lets her weight sink, then when he presses up, she just sinks further. So now they're going to go ahead and do the lift. He does a down, up. She barely bends her legs and then presses straight up. It's a real easy lift for the guy if you have an incredible partner like Tiffany Rabical. So she goes up into the air. It's much more stable in a steg. And you notice his arms were slightly bent, and there's a light hold on her shoulders as she goes up. Once she goes up, you straighten out your arms. That locks you in place, and you hold on to her with your hands tighter. If you hold on with your hands too tight, she can never slide up into it. Now, they like to come out of this by going back to the shoulders because they may want to do other sequences. I like this lift. I like to get the score, so I just have my partner kick forward. I slip my hands, I let her roll forward, then my hands slip between her arms and her lats, and I kind of do I just let her down that way, like I'm a forklift. So that's the arm-to-arm, making it look easy. It's actually a very easy lift for the man. It just takes a very skilled woman, and that's why it scores so high. Okay, this next lift, we got Sophie and Remy. This is I love this couple. They're from France. He's a fighter pilot, a test pilot. And she came down to me in France one day when I was doing tandem surfing, and she said, "Will you please take me out tandem surfing? Ever since I was a little girl in the Alps, I wanted to learn to tandem." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so tired." But I took her out, and Remy didn't even surf, but he loved her so much he learned to surf so they could tandem together, and they're a really good tandem team. They're demonstrating for us a knee stand. There's two ways to do a knee stand. You can do it front-facing or back-facing. Concept is pretty much the same. I do a lot of what you can do when you're coming out of, for example, a fake arm-to-arm. You can have her, instead of going straight to the board, come down, have her heels in, her feet out, her toes out. She can hit the crease of your hip and lead out into a reverse knee stand or a back knee stand. This knee stand really isn't a knee stand at all. It actually is up in the hip crease. So you can see as her feet hit his hips, he leans out at the same time that she leans forward. Kite surfers are good at this lift. Sailors understand the concept of the opposite dynamic. It's easier if he fully extends his arms. And then it's just really important that they get their timing. If he says lean out, it's important the girls start leaning out when he says so, because he'll start leaning back, and then he may end up falling off the board if she doesn't lean forward. So it's a nice basic lift. It's not used very often as the primary lift, but it's often used right at the end of a ride just to get some style points. This next lift is going to be demonstrated by the human freak, Jim Moore, who's an unbelievable athlete and surfer. He came from a gymnastic and acrobatic background. It was very strange when I first met him because I didn't know who he was and how he could be so great for not having hung out with other tandem surfers. He walked out of the gym basically and into the water. And this woman, she's kind of a bit of a beginner. She's only the world champion diver, and her name is Ray. And they're going to demonstrate a straddle. And the straddle, it starts out like a shoulder stand, except he extends his hands up and points his hands forward, and they interlock hands, and she just presses up. This is easy for the guy. He just locks his arms, engages his lats, and she has to point those toes to the sky. That's why the more extreme lifts that you get, it's really the woman that's displaying her ability, and the man's just, being the workhorse. So I'm really proud of her. This straddle is a nice high straddle. The difference between a straddle and a Kennedy is just that the woman's legs wouldn't be as high. With a Kennedy, the woman's leg can face downwards at about a 30 or 40 degree angle. The next thing we're going to show you is an attitude. This was my weightlifting buddy, and I talked him into tandem surfing, and he ends up getting 5th in the world in 2006. He ends up tying with me right now on the world tour at 3rd. But you know what the truth about him is? We found out from his mom that she calls him Chunky Peanut. So I don't care how good a surfer is, I've always got that on him. And this is who I call the beautiful Marie from Lacanau, France. So he reaches down, he grabs her ankle, and puts his hand high up on her thigh, almost as high as you can go. Bend down, and she does a powerful jump up into the air, and she does like a little bit of an arabesque, leaning out a little bit with her hands up, her stomach locked in, her leg back to keep balance. And she's doing her job by pulling up, and he's doing her job by locking out his shoulders. One thing that I encourage the men to do is when you lock out your lifts with your arms, always engage your lats. Pull your shoulder down towards your hip as you fully extend your arm. Shoulder is a wonderful joint. You don't want to abuse it. Next lift is called a statue. There's different ways to get into it. You can see that she's put her knee up high, and I'm bending low, and her foot has gone into the palm of my hand. Sometimes people will just hold the girl's ankle instead. It's the same concept. I like to start with my surfing hand under her thigh. Some start with their surfing hand on top of her thigh, maybe, but I think by starting out with under her thigh, I get to throw her a little bit with that hand too, and it helps accelerate her. We do a slow down up. This is really important. You're not lifting dead weight, you're lifting living weight. So as I pop her as we throw her into the air, she starts with her big jump and accelerates upwards as she goes weightless. It's at that point when my feet should fire. I shouldn't fire as she fires. I want to do fast hands as she's going up, and then a half beat later fire with my legs. She goes up into the air, and at the top of her arch, my hand goes from the back of her leg to the front and grabs her almost up to her hip crease. For balance, she leans forward in a kind of like a little bit of an arabesque and rests her foot against my bicep, and now she's stable. Now if she leans into this a little bit more, I can release her foot that I'm holding the bottom of, and she can go into a one-hand statue. Another good combination out of a statue is what is called the Americano. What the girl does is she reaches down and lets her arm go past my outside of my shoulder. And I kind of pull her leg towards her so she can grab it. It's really important that the girl open her hips up, points her hips to the sky, and she grabs that other leg. Once I feel her locked in, and it really does lock in, it's kind of nice. Her head will rest against my head. Her arm is pressed against the outside of my arm. This lift will tend to fall outward, so the girl has to make sure to open her hips and keep that leg high. Then I let go of her foot, and you can see she kind of rolls into the lift. Once you're in that position, you can hold it forever. Her head's against my head, her arm's against my arm, I'm locked into her hip